thought his NFL career was over when he got drafted to a team that just traded multiple first-round picks to select their new franchise quarterback only a few rounds earlier. Despite being a backup for years, he eventually landed what was the largest contract in NFL history. He was counted out in high school, college, and the NFL. This is the rise of Kirk Cousins that no one saw coming. Growing up, Kirk never believed he would make it to the NFL. His dad was the coach of his 8th grade football team and would write letters to every player at the end of the season detailing their strengths and what they needed to work on. The final line of Kirk's letter said this: "Kirk, if you keep developing, you could someday be an all-conference and maybe even an all-state player in high school." Kirk says he remembers being 14, reading that, thinking, whoa, my dad thinks I could someday be an all-state player. That's big time. Turns out Kirk didn't actually make All-State, but as this video goes on, you'll see why that just seems like it was destined to happen. As Kirk entered high school, a cloud of uncertainty loomed over his football aspirations. Many doubted whether he could even make it to the D1 level, suggesting that a local D3 school might be a better fit. Adding to the challenge, Kirk's high school didn't even have a football program till his freshman year. For his junior year, he finally got the opportunity to be the varsity starting quarterback, but in the first game of the season, he broke his ankle. He was devastated and questioned whether or not he even had a future in football anymore. After the game, Kirk called his dad and said, "This means I can't play college football. I just can't." With 4 games left in the season, Kirk's doctor cleared him under one condition: you have to play like a grandma with a really strong arm. Kirk spent his winter break following that season handwriting letters to college coaches, including a DVD of his highlights from the 4 games he got to play. Even after being realistic and sending those letters to small schools, not one person reached back out to him. But Cousins kept his head down and kept working. He led his school to their first ever playoff appearance his senior year, but only had 2 offers from Toledo and Western Michigan by the end of the season. He was not even ranked on the top 100 quarterbacks list for the class of 2007. But then, as fate would have it, a series of intriguing what-ifs emerged, offering Kirk a glimmer of hope at a scholarship from a Power 5 school. The situation unfolded when Michigan State decided to part ways with their head coach, which led to 4-star quarterback Keith Nichol decommitting from the school. Suddenly, the Spartans didn't have a quarterback in this recruiting class, and the new coaching staff invited Cousins for a visit. This seemed like a dream scenario for the overlooked Cousins until the coaches told him there was another quarterback they wanted more, and only if they couldn't land him would they offer Kirk. But then, 2 weeks before signing day, Michigan called Kirk and offered him a scholarship. He accepted immediately. Yet, the roller coaster of emotions wasn't over yet. Just a week after Kirk committed, Michigan State signed the 30th ranked quarterback in the nation, Nick Foles. When Cousins arrived on campus, Foles was already being touted as the team's future. Kirk felt like he was never going to get the opportunity to play, and even before he arrived on campus, he was looking up ways online to get out of his commitment. During his redshirt freshman year, Cousins was the 3rd-string quarterback behind backup Foles and starter Brian Hoyer. One of Cousins' biggest weaknesses his first year at Michigan State was his size. He barely weighed in at 170. So instead of bar hopping on weekends like normal college kids, Kirk and some O-linemen would go cafeteria hopping. They would go get a plate of food at every single dining hall on campus, then go lift weights. Heading into his 2nd season, it seemed like Cousins was outplaying Foles in practice and beating him out for the backup quarterback spot. It was at this point Foles decided to transfer to Arizona. But of course, things don't stay easy for Kirk for more than a few hours after that. Later that day, it was announced a familiar face was returning. The face of a guy that actually allowed Kirk to go to Michigan State: Keith Nichol. The former 4-star had lost the quarterback battle at Oklahoma to Sam Bradford and decided to transfer to Michigan State. Kirk persevered and won the backup quarterback battle and got to see the field in 5 games that season. The next year, he competed with the former 4-star Nichol for the starting job, and the 2-star Cousins ended up on top. Despite winning the starting job, Cousins didn't have some crazy fantastic season. He threw for 2,680 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions, while the team had a losing record. His junior year, he led the Spartans to an 11-2 record and the title of Big Ten co-champions. His completion percentage increased a ton from 60.4% his sophomore season to 66.9% his junior season. In his final collegiate season, he led the team to yet another 11-win season and the first ever Big Ten championship game. He threw for over 3,000 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, and was named 2nd team Big Ten. The next phase of Cousins' football journey led him to the NFL, but it was every bit as turbulent and challenging as his experiences in high school and college. The road ahead was a roller coaster of adversity. Cousins was projected to be a round 2 or round 3 pick in the 2012 NFL Draft. Andrew Luck, Robert Griffin III, Ryan Tannehill, and Brandon Weeden were the 4 quarterbacks selected in the first round. On night 2 of the draft, Kirk's mom set up a taco bar and family and friends gathered in the living room. They watched Brock Osweiler get picked in the second round. Then in the third, Russell Wilson and Nick Foles were selected. The second night of the draft came and went, and Kirk didn't hear his name called. On day 3 of the draft, Kirk and his family were again waiting in their living room when a call from a Virginia area code popped up on his phone. Kirk and his family were confused. Why would someone from a Virginia area code be calling? Washington just selected Robert Griffin III with the 2nd overall pick less than 48 hours ago. Kirk almost missed the call, he was so perplexed. After picking up the phone and saying a few dazed Kirk hung up and announced it was Shanahan and Washington was going to pick him. And just like that, Washington drafted Cousins in the 4th round, 102nd overall. He was stunned and the room fell silent. Kirk retreated to his bedroom to be alone. Yet again, Kirk was in a position where it seemed impossible for him to get a chance to see the field. What were the odds he got drafted to a team that just selected the guy they want to be their franchise quarterback just a few rounds earlier in the same draft? A guy they traded 3 first-round picks and a second-round pick to be able to draft. When Cousins arrived in Washington, he figured, hey, they're going to be developing RG3, so I'm going to be a sponge and absorb everything Shanahan, who once coached John Elway and Steve Young, is teaching him. The problem was RG3 was getting every single snap in practice. So after practice ended, Cousins would stay with then Washington quarterback coach Matt LaFleur and run through all the plays they did at that practice. LaFleur wasn't the only future head coach a young Kirk Cousins got to work with. There was also this guy named Sean McVay you might have heard of who was running the offense. Although Robert Griffin III did win Rookie of the Year, Cousins did get to see the field some his first season in the league. His NFL debut was made in the 3rd quarter of a Week 5 game versus the Falcons. RG3 was taken out of the game after suffering a concussion. Cousins threw a touchdown pass, but 2 late interceptions when trying to tie the game. But then, just 9 weeks later, Cousins did something improbable. Washington was down 8 with 1:50 left in the game. They were driving down the field, but then RG3 hurt his knee and had to come out. Cousins came in on 3rd and 6 at their own 40 and converted due to pass interference. RG3 then came back in and brought them into Ravens territory, but his knee just couldn't hold up anymore, and he was helped off the field yet again with 45 seconds left in the game. 2nd and 20, the ball was at Baltimore's 26, and Kirk was forced back into action. With 32 seconds left, he threw a touchdown to bring them within 2. It all came down to the 2-point conversion. A QB draw was drawn up for Cousins, and he lowered his shoulder and dove into the end zone to tie the game. Washington went on to win the game in overtime with a game-winning field goal. The following week, Robert Griffin was ruled out due to that knee injury, so Cousins got to make his first NFL start versus the Browns. He completed 26 of 37 passes for 329 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. The performance earned him the Rookie of the Week award. Washington went on to make the playoffs that year, but unfortunately, their first-round matchup with the Seattle Seahawks is the game that ruined RG3's career. His knee wasn't fully healed from earlier in the season, and with 6:24 left in the game, down a touchdown, he re-hurt it and fumbled. I mean, look at him squeeze the O-lineman's hand here, like, oof, you know he's in horrific pain. You feel terrible watching that. So down 10 with 4:53 left, Kirk Cousins took the field, but he couldn't do much, completing just 3 of 10 passes for 31 yards. Washington lost, and their season was over. The next year, RG3 was the starter again, Cousins the backup. He saw the field in 5 games and got to start 3 due to RG3's injuries. He had 854 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions, while only completing just over 52% of his passes. In week 2 of the 2014 season, Robert Griffin dislocated his ankle and was ruled out for a handful of weeks. This was a prime opportunity for Cousins to show what he could do, but things did not go as planned for the 3rd-year QB. He lost each of his first 4 starts, then in his 5th start, he was benched at halftime in favor of Colt McCoy. The day after being benched, it came out that Cousins just wasn't moved to backup duties. He was demoted all the way to the 3rd-string quarterback, meaning he wouldn't even be in uniform for the final games of the season. That offseason, Kirk started working with private quarterback coach Jeff Christensen. If you saw Quarterback on Netflix, he is Mahomes' private quarterback coach right now. Jeff didn't just help Kirk physically, he also helped him mentally develop into a better quarterback. Heading into camp for the upcoming 2015 season, Robert Griffin III was named the starter yet again. But on August 31st, just before the season started, Jay Gruden named Kirk Cousins the team's starting quarterback. Heading into a Week 7 7 matchup with the Buccaneers, Washington was sitting with a 2-4 record. They needed to turn their season around fast, but found themselves down 24-0 in the second quarter versus Tampa Bay. Then Kirk said, "Hold on, let me do something I think you will like." He brought them back into the game and down 6 with 1:57 left. Washington started their drive at their own 30. With 25 seconds left in the game, Cousins threw a dart into the end zone to win the game and complete the largest comeback in franchise history. Cousins' stats were insane that game. He had a total of 6 touchdowns, 3 rushing, 3 passing. He also completed 82% of his passes for 317 yards. And yes, after that game, he let out a very warranted, "You like that? You like that? Yes, sir. Yes, we do. Yes, sir. You like that?" That win turned Washington's season around. After that game, they went 7-3 and won the NFC East. During that stretch, Cousins also won the December NFC Offensive Player of the Month award. In their wildcard matchup with the Packers, Washington held a 11-0 lead with just over 9 minutes left in the second quarter. But by halftime, they found themselves down 17-11. Washington lost the game 35-18. Cousins only completed 29 of his 46 passes for 329 yards and 1 touchdown. The big problem was the offensive line couldn't keep him standing upright. He was sacked 6 times and lost almost 60 yards due to it. Kirk finished his first NFL season as a starting quarterback with the highest completion percentage in the league at 69.8%. He threw for 4,166 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. The following season, Washington missed the playoffs, but Kirk's numbers continued to impress. In a Week 8 game versus the Bengals, he threw for a career-high 458 yards, but the game ended in a tie. In that 2016 season, he threw for 4,900 yards, 25 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and was named to his first Pro Bowl. After the 2016 season, Kirk was set to become a free agent. Him and Washington tried to agree on a long-term deal, but couldn't. So for the second year in a row, Kirk was going to play on the franchise tag. During that 2017 season, Cousins passed for over 4,000 yards for the 3rd consecutive year, but Washington only went 7-9 and missed the playoffs. On January 31st, 2018, Washington traded for Alex Smith, signaling that Kirk's time in the Capitol was over. Despite his old team moving on from him, many teams were eager to sign the quarterback, and for a lot of money. The Jets offered Cousins $90 million guaranteed, but he felt he fit best in Minnesota and signed what was then the largest contract in NFL history, a 3-year, $85 million deal that was fully guaranteed. Kirk had his best season to date that first year in Minnesota. He passed for over 4,000 yards for the 4th year in a row. He threw 30 touchdowns and just 10 interceptions. But the problem was the Vikings went just 8-7-1 and missed the playoffs just 1 year after going all the way to the NFC Championship game. The pressure was on for the highest paid player in the league in 2019. Kirk unfortunately lost his 4,000 yard streak in 2019. It's actually the only year he hasn't thrown for over 4,000 yards while being a starting quarterback, by the way. But losing that streak didn't matter too much to the quarterback because Minnesota went 10-5 and finally made the playoffs. The biggest knock on Kirk up to this point was him not being able to win primetime or big games. For the wildcard round, the 6th seed Vikings had to head south to play in one of the loudest NFL stadiums, the Superdome, to take on the 3 seed Saints. With 2 seconds left in the game, the Saints hit a 49-yard field goal to tie it and force overtime. The pressure couldn't be any greater for the quarterback who usually doesn't shine under the bright lights. The Vikings got the ball first and started the drive at their own 28. A few plays into the drive, Cousins threw a deep ball dime to Thielen to put the Vikings in the red zone. Then on 3rd and goal, from the 4-yard line, Kirk threw a jump ball to Rudolph in the corner of the end zone to win his first ever playoff game in walk-off fashion. The Vikings did lose the next week though versus the 49ers, who went on to make the Super Bowl that year. Cousins completed 72% of his passes for 172 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception in that one, but just like his last playoff loss in Washington, he was sacked 6 times. Since his first playoff win, Kirk has made 3 more Pro Bowls, had 2 seasons with over 30 passing touchdowns, helped the Vikings complete the largest comeback in NFL history, but still hasn't got that second playoff win. Statistically, Kirk is a really good quarterback, but what's holding him back from being great is getting those wins when it matters most. in the playoffs. Kirk is going to be 36 this upcoming season, and time is ticking for him to possibly win it all. The Vikings have a good team this year, specifically on offense. I mean, their secondary, it's kind of dicey. It scares me a little bit, but that's a topic for another video. Not only are they getting Justin Jefferson back, they just drafted Jordan Addison in the first round. That wide receiver core is going to be crazy. This upcoming season has huge implications for Kirk Cousins' legacy. It could make or break how we talk about him in 10, 20 years. Are we going to remember Kirk Cousins as someone who had really great stats, but choked during the playoffs? Or is he going to change his story this season? If you guys enjoyed this video, you might enjoy this video I did on Josh Rosen. It's kind of the opposite of what happened with Kirk Cousins, someone who was really highly touted from a young age and just fell off once he got into the NFL.